Hey there, it's Dr. Mike T. Nelson back here once again with the Flex Diet podcast. And today, again, a little bit of a solo cast. I wanted to tell you that the Physiologic flexibility certification is now open, depending on when you are listening to this. So if you're listening to this right when it came out, it is open as of Monday, March 22nd, 2021, and it will be open until midnight Central Standard Time, Monday, March 29th, 2021. For all the details and to enroll, go to www.physiologicflexibility.com. physiologicflexibility.com. I definitely need a longer URL. You can also, if you're on the newsletter already, you'll be seeing information about it there. Worst case, you can contact me through my website, miketnelson.com. But all the information there is physiologicflexibility.com. And what this is a interventions related to 4 areas of homeostatic regulation you've probably heard me talk about. So at the end of the day, the interventions look like hot exposure, sauna, cold water exposure, different breathing techniques, everything from breath holds to more of a supraventilation technique like Wim Hof breathing, blood glucose regulation, everything there from what are some good fasted measures to ask your doc about. Again, everything from fasting blood glucose through your doc or at home if you like, continuous even glucose monitors, and much, much more. We also talk about the ketogenic diet. So surprising that I am not against the ketogenic diet, but I think there's a very good time to use it. I think the ketogenic diet or ketosis serves as a backup to your normal system. And maybe once in a while we want to run the backup to make sure everything is going well. And there's some specific things that you'd want to do to modify your training at that time. High intensity interval training, aerobic base work, and much more. So now this kind of sounds like a hodgepodge of all these different interventions. And my pet peeve, I guess, with a lot of courses out there is that you can take some really good courses that go really balls deep into blood glucose and different types of blood work. My buddy Dr. Brian Walsh has a great one on blood glucose regulation. For blood work for athletes, my buddies Dr. Tommy Wood and Dr. Ben House, who have been on here before, have an excellent course on that. And the courses that I enjoy that are really deep are very good. Like those two are great. If you want to take courses on breathing, The Art of Breath by Brian McKenzie, Rob Wilson, and those guys is great. The downside of what I saw is that there isn't any, I guess you'd say, or not much thought put into when do you use these other type of techniques? What is an entire system to put them together? What I found with clients and just answering a lot of questions is that people would find a new cool technique and they would just kind of throw it onto their training. And sometimes that works really good. Sometimes that doesn't work well at all. And they'll add a lot more stress. So for not to pick on CrossFit athletes, but that type of athlete is very driven, tend to be more type A, really enjoy Metcons feeling very drained. I have noticed that they tend to gravitate more towards a Wim Hof breathing type style. So really fast breathing, some very hard, aggressive breath holds. And that can be beneficial when it's done correctly with the right dose. But it is also a pretty high stressor. And then they want to go sit in cold water at 38 degrees for 5 minutes. That's another stressor. Again, all these things can be beneficial, but you have to look at what is the big picture and the context of when to use them, how to do a gradual exposure to them, and then how to monitor it to make sure that these recovery techniques are actually allowing you to do more work and not limiting the amount of work that you can do. Because if you just add a bunch of high stress techniques to your current training and you're maybe kind of on the ragged bleeding edge already, I have seen it be enough to push people over the edge. Then we've got to take a couple of weeks off of training to recover, and then you're losing, quality time that you could be training over those couple of weeks. Again, if you match the correct strategy to your goals and what you're doing, I find for the amount of time that is invested, they can be quite beneficial. So at the end of the course, there's over 40 different explicit action items, so you'll know exactly what to do. And as I mentioned, they're broken up into 4 main areas. This is based on the concept of homeostatic regulators. These are things that your body absolutely has to hold constant, or else you'll die. So our body is very much survival based. If we want to get better performance and energy and body comp and all these positive things from it, we need to teach it to survive better, which is why sleep is essential, good nutrition, those things are very essential. And I cover those in the Flex Diet certification. So this one is based on the 4 homeostatic regulators. The first one being temperature. Your body has to hold 98.6 or pretty close to it. However, we can do things with cold exposure, cold water immersion, cryo, colder room air temperatures, and we can go to the other extreme. We can go to saunas and get very hot and sweat and be exposed to high temperatures. Both these have different mechanisms that they regulate through. Maybe inflammation, although that's a little bit debatable. A lot of it is through something called HSPs or heat shock proteins. And there's some very beneficial data on exposing yourself to these different extremes in a controlled environment that is still very safe. And the next one would be pH. Your body has to regulate pH very close, but you can do some horrible stuff like multiple 500-meter repeats on a rower or a 2K on a rower. You can do interval sprints. You could use what a client of mine calls the devil bike or the assault bike. There's other ways you can move a lot of muscle mass very fast within around 30 seconds to maybe 3 minutes, and your body will kick out a ton of, quote, lactic acid. So lactic acid is really a lactate plus hydrogen ions. So lactate is not a bad thing at all. It's actually good. It's a very high energy fuel that your body loves to use. Muscle can take it up, cardiac tissue can, your brain can. So lactate gets reused almost directly as a fuel. Some of it can be sent to the liver via something called the Cori cycle. Excuse me. And it can be changed into glucose. So lactic acid, it's primarily the hydrogen ions that are the issue. So again, there's some benefits there of training your pH. The third one would be fuels, primarily blood glucose. Can you do well with a high blood glucose insult like 2 Pop-Tarts? And can you go well on the other end of the spectrum? Can you do a fast for 19 to 24 hours and still do pretty good? Can you run the backup system to all of this, which I believe is the state of ketosis? And the fourth one is going to be oxygen and CO2. There are benefits to both of those, but they're not as, I'd say, evident as what you would believe, right? So there's some interesting stuff around nasal breathing. Nasal breathing will increase levels of CO2. That might be beneficial if that's what you're training and you are sub-max. Again, you can see a whole podcast I did this on nasal versus mouth breathing. However, if you're doing all-out max exercise, you don't really want the air to be a limiter as much as possible. So breathing through your mouth, getting the most air in and out, as much oxygen as you can in and as much carbon dioxide as you can out is going to be beneficial. Now we can take that concept and we can go even further. Maybe we would do this at rest. So we can do breathing techniques that may alter those levels at rest also, and that may have some benefits. So the course is based on these 4 areas of homeostatic regulation and how we can go from one extreme to the next in a nice controlled fashion. What this allows you then is to be a master of a lot of these recovery techniques. So you'll learn when to do them and also when not to do them. As I mentioned, higher stress techniques added to very stressful training, probably not a good idea. So maybe you should change your meditation style to more of a Zen style meditation where you're just observing your thoughts as they kind of come in and go out. Your breathing is much more relaxed and much lower. That is going to help increase more of the parasympathetic side of your nervous system. So understanding the context of how all these things play together, I think, is key. And this is done via the system of the 4 homeostatic regulators. And it's done as a video course. We've got a big picture that kind of evolves over the course of 8 videos, ranging anywhere from 20 minutes to 60 minutes each. This gives you the context of the theories that are related to homeostatic regulators and physiologic flexibility in general. And then we've got explicit technical videos where you don't need to read studies to break this down. I think so far for this course I'm at almost 400 studies, I think. I started looking at this concept over a decade ago now. So the slides that are technical, but we explain them in normal terms. You don't have to sit down and read all of the technical research studies, but it does get pretty nerdy, right? So we're going to talk, for example, in the cold section about some of the key studies that looked at cold exposure related to hypertrophy, how much muscle you can add. And a short takeaway is that, doing some cold exposure immediately after training for hypertrophy, if your goal is to absolutely maximize the amount of muscle you can put on your frame, probably not a good idea. However, taking a cold shower after training is going to be just fine, right? So we look at what are the actual parameters of the studies that were done. Similar with hot exposure. An example there is that while sauna has a lot of benefits to it, the regulation of growth hormone, you can find a legit study that shows growth hormone was upregulated by about 1,700%. I would probably sell a lot more courses if I said, hey, super secret squirrel tip to increasing growth hormone by 1,700%, and I can show like a legit study where that happened. While that is true, does that mean that that short spike of growth hormone going that high, does that have any real physiologic effect? Is it really going to strip fat off you really fast? Is it really going to help your connective tissue and your muscles? Unfortunately, no. All right, we've got other data from Dr. David West showing that those short excursions of hormone, while exceedingly high, don't really seem to do a whole lot for our physiology. However, there are benefits to sauna, primarily through heat shock protein regulation and some other mechanisms. Some fascinating studies that Dr. Rhonda Patrick has mentioned, looking at longevity, big increases from some of the Finnish studies. And it is beneficial, I believe, for hot and cold exposure. But we want to know, what is the reason we're doing it? What is the benefit? When should we do it? When should we not do it? And we can say the same thing for pH, fuels, oxygen, and carbon dioxide. So we got a technical primer that goes through all the details, the most relevant studies, and breaks them down so that at the end of the day, you're doing the things that are going to move you forward with your recovery. Also with this, for right now, for at least this opening, you will receive direct access to me. So as you're going through the course, I want to make sure that you understand the material. And if something isn't clear, you'll have my private email to just send me a note. And I'll do whatever I can to make sure that it is understandable for you. So I want to help support you whatever way I can and answer any questions you have about the actual material itself. The most common question I get is, how is this different from the Flex Diet certification? So the Flex Diet certification is primarily based on nutrition and recovery. The physiologic flexibility, to me, is like the next level. So if you're pretty good on nutrition, you've got your exercise pretty dialed in, your sleep is pretty good, then what are those next things that you have an extra maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes a day, or you can find it to do? And if you go into Dr. Google or look on the old interwebs, I'm sure you can find all sorts of stuff, because there's no shortage of people pitching you something that will do amazing things for you. Some of it's true, some of it's not so true. So this course is designed to give you the framework, the knowledge, and 40 different specific action items of what you can do to further accelerate your recovery, increase your robustness as a human being, and ideally make you more anti-fragile, right? So this way, you're going to be much harder to kill. You're increasing your body's ability to survive, and that is going to transfer to health and also recovery, in my very biased opinion. So it is open as of today, Monday, March 22nd, 2021, and it will close again for this quarter, Monday, March 29th, 2001 at midnight. Then go to physiologicflexibility.com. So www.physiologicflexibility.com for all of the information there. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you in the course. Take care.